Oh, thank you so much for that introduction. I am really excited to share this with you this evening. And I will share my screen. Um, as Natalie said in her lovely introduction, thank you. I'm here to talk about WeThrive, which is an app that was just launched last week that I've been working on for about 18 months. And it is designed to help menstruators everywhere help understand whether their periods are normal. And this is the first time that I'm giving this presentation. And so you're the first group to officially hear about WeThrive. So WeThrive is an app that's freely available to download. It contains no advertising. It's not industry sponsored. And so it is available for free download from the Google, Android, and iOS stores. It is created by pediatricians, so myself and another pediatrician, pediatric oncologist, hematologist at the IWK who specializes in bleeding disorders. We created this app together. It is specifically designed for teenagers, and we actually used feedback from teenagers to help develop the app. And it really is meant to be for anyone who menstruates, regardless of their gender identity. What makes WeThrive unique, a few things, but the first is that it is the only app that can identify heavy periods. A few other things that make us unique is that it is the only one designed exclusively by physicians. It also, as I said, is free to download, and there's no fee for upgrading or a membership that's required. It doesn't require any specific patient information or login information. You don't need to make an account to use WeThrive. And so this is the main landing page for the app. And so what's highlighted here in the middle is a countdown towards the next period. So being prepared for their period was something that adolescents really identified as being important to them. So that's a feature of the main page. And then right underneath, you have the opportunity to log symptoms that you may be experiencing, and I'll talk about those, as well as to log your period and your flow. And at the bottom is really the navigation page. So this being the landing page, the next is the period calendar. This third one is really an opportunity for a health check, flow check, as well as where clinicians will get most of their information from the app. And then there's a learning center at the end that includes a list of frequently asked questions. And so I'm going to go through the app here in detail and give you a little tour. And so, as I mentioned, those last three buttons are your period calendar, the flow check, and the learning center. But this is the page that you'll get when you first open the app. And so the period tracker looks like this. And so it'll have the day's date on the top. And for each day, the adolescent has the opportunity to log their flow in terms of the number of products they've used and the saturation of those products. And once you scroll down, you'll see that there is also the ability to log whether if you use a menstrual cup, how full your menstrual cup is. And you also have the ability to track any clots that you may have passed during your period. So this is based on the pictorial bleeding assessment chart, or the PBAC, which some clinicians may be familiar with. And anytime you add a product, it goes to the top of the list, and you can add or remove products at any time during that day. What I like about this is that you could use it in real time and the information will save. And so it's not like other period tracking devices where you have to go back and say, oh yeah, I think I went through 4 pads that day. This can really be in real time. So every time you've changed a product, you can just quickly check it off, and that's your log for that. And at the end of your period, so when you have completed your period, there's a little toggle button that says this was the last day of my flow. The app will automatically generate a period report and will notify you when the period report is ready, which is really instantly once you've completed your period. And it will give you a score based on the number of products you used during your period and this level of saturation of those products. A score of 100 or more indicates heavy menstrual bleeding or heavy periods. And again, for the clinicians and researchers in the audience, this is based on the PBAC, that has been validated in the 90s. And really, it is a score of 100 or more has a sensitivity and specificity of greater than 80% for diagnosing heavy menstrual bleeding. The period report will tell you whether your bleeding falls within the normal range based on your score, or whether you may meet the criteria for heavy menstrual bleeding, and will direct you to care. And I'll show you what that looks like. The period report will also give a summary of when the next period is expected, the average amount of products used per day, so that you can be prepared for your next period based on how many products you may need to bring with you. And then after this is sort of over to the next screen where you have the chance to view your period prediction calendar. And so with this calendar, you're able to view up to 3 months in advance period predictions for future dates. The darker the orange ball, the more likely it is that you will have flow that day. So one of the biggest complaints, I suppose, I got from adolescents about other period apps is that the predictions weren't always right about when they would get their period. And I will say that it's a really hard thing to do to predict your period, especially if you've just started your period, because it can often be irregular. But what I say to users is that the more you log your flow, the more accurate the app will be. And I also built in this feature that gives you predicted period days outside of the window. So really, the darker the orange ball is, the more likely you are to have flow in those days, but there's still this range of up to 10 days of possibility that you could have flow. And that's just so that adolescents can be prepared that they may have flow on those days. Users are also able to track any symptoms that they may be experiencing. And these symptoms can be tracked on any day, even if they're not having flow on that day. Symptoms including pain, mood, and any other body changes like bloating or cravings can be recorded on the app. And this is a part that is really unique about WeThrive. So this is part of the assessment of period health that this app offers. And it's called the Flow Check. Now, the Flow Check is the Adolescent Menstrual Bleeding Questionnaire, which is a questionnaire that my team developed and validated that was just published actually the day before this app was launched. So it was all very timely. But if you're interested, I can definitely provide you with the literature that supports the use of the Adolescent Menstrual Bleeding Questionnaire. We decided to call it the Flow Check in the app because it was a bit shorter and kind of had a more buzz to it than the long name for the questionnaire. And what this is, it's a 25 question survey that asks about how a user's period affects their quality of life. And we developed this tool as a way to better understand how heavy menstrual bleeding affects quality of life. And what we found is actually that a score of greater than 30 on our flow check had good discriminatory power to identify heavy periods. So what that means is that your score on the flow check may actually indicate heavy periods, even if you don't track your period at all. So we know there are people out there that don't like to track their periods or the number of products they use. So this is an alternative way to identify heavy menstrual bleeding in that group. And users will get a push notification for a reminder to complete the flow check. They can always turn those off if they wish to not receive push notifications, but it is an option there. So as I said, the questions for the flow check, there's 25 questions. Most of them address the impact of bleeding on quality of life. For example, how many days of school do you miss for your menstrual bleeding? And it takes between 5 and 10 minutes to complete. It should really be completed in one sitting, but it's not something that needs to be completed every month. It's really something that could just be completed once, or if at any point someone experiences a change in their periods, they could choose to complete it. To get an idea of whether their flow might be too heavy. And this is just another example of a question on the flow check. So how many days do you think your school work suffered because of your bleeding? So this flow check asks questions related to quality of life as it relates to school, social activities, as well as activities with friends and family. And so this is where when you complete the flow check, the app will automatically generate a score. And as I mentioned, a score greater than 30 indicates possible heavy periods. So this is what it would look like if the flow check or the period tracking identified a high score indicative of possible heavy periods. It will say, you know, a score of over 30 indicates possible heavy periods. Contact your doctor or the nearest bleeding disorder clinic if you're concerned about your periods. But I actually updated this to say, find a clinic near you to reach out to someone to talk about their periods, because I really want this app to be accessible to everyone, like whether they have a bleeding disorder or not. And I recognize that not everyone has, you know, a connection to a bleeding disorder clinic. And so what I've done then is incorporated a list of clinics in every province in Canada that patients can be directed to. They're all walk-in clinics that don't require that a patient have a family physician. And I put here, you can help others. And so this is really where the opportunity for the app as a research tool comes into play. So when you download the app for the first time, you'll be asked whether or not it would be okay if the app collected your anonymous information, so the score, the total scores that you get on the flow check and the period tracking, if it would be okay to send that to me so that I can use it to further understand how heavy periods affect quality of life. And I can hopefully use that data to improve this app over time. And so, of course, that's anonymous information. I don't have any information about who fills out the app or where they are or even how old they are. It's really just the total scores that with the user's permission, I can look at to help further research. And this was something that was really important to the users too. Like adolescents want to know that they're, you know, making a difference and helping others. And so that's what I'm using the app for. This is what the list of clinics looks like. So you can tap on your province and it'll have a list of clinics in your region. I will say this list is very dynamic and it's constantly updated. And so I also included a link to a website that you can actually enter your address and it'll match you with the closest clinic to you if you don't find one in the app that's geographically convenient, because there's a lot out there. In the Learning Center, there's also a list of frequently asked questions, and this is myself answering questions that I get from teenagers about their periods. And so it's anything from what does it mean if I have a heavy period to what is the normal color of period blood, to specifics as to what is an inherited bleeding disorder. And so, you know, there is a very clear sort of warning that none of this information is to replace medical advice that a user would get from their own clinician. But I do reference all of the answers that I put in the app so that people can read more about it. And these are evidence-based sources, just because I know there's everything out there on the internet. So I really wanted to give adolescents something they could rely on for accurate information. And I'm very open. In fact, I would encourage anybody here who has questions before, during, or after tonight's session about periods to send them to me, because I will answer them and I'll post them in the FAQ. And it's a good way to ask those questions while being completely anonymous, because I'll never know, you know, who you are. It'll all just be electronic. And so that's a quick run through. I really just wanted to show you the key features of the app. Feel free to tell everyone you know and menstruators in your life about the app. I would really also, I'm very open to feedback. We are still very much in the early stages. So tell me what you like about it. Tell me what you would change about it. And just at that email that I showed you earlier. I just wanted to thank the Canadian Hemophilia Society. This app was funded by a very generous grant, and I'm very grateful for that. And I really hope that the app makes life better for menstruators with hemophilia, because I really hope that this will lead to an earlier detection of heavy menstrual bleeding. I want to thank Dr. Price, who was my mentor on this project, without whom this would not have been possible. Redspace was the local app developer that I used, and they were exceptional. A lot of people at the IWK that helped me put this together. Brad is a family member who did all of my digital marketing on a volunteer basis, and I would be amiss not to thank him. And of course, want to thank menstruators everywhere for providing their expertise towards this app. And so I'll conclude with that. These are our social media pages. We are on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Please share those with people in your life, whether or not they are menstruators. I think the more likes and shares we have on those pages, the better it is to get the word out there. So I'll end there, and I'm really grateful. Thanks again for the opportunity to speak, and I'm happy to hear any questions or comments that you may have.